from the beginning.
And I was shown that that Lucifer would return, that the UN and the Vatican were going to be completely behind it, again, under false pretenses. He's going to show up and say, I'm here to save the day, right? And, okay, fine, you know.
Yeah, of course,
ahead,
you can say whatever you want.
But
I've always hated censorship. It's the internet.
Sometimes, you know, once they get you for your first love bite, well, it depends on how aware you are, right?
I forgot my bullets. I never had a gun. Here I am left standing. Am I the only one? For what I see, memories have guilted me. I'll never see the sun.
First of all, as you know, the Anunnaki and the Draco are enemies. Second of all, underneath Baghdad was a stargate that was created by the Anunnaki so that they could transfer from Jupiter to the Earth.
I'll never see the sun. I could just end it all, but the demons will have won.
Magical practitioners that, you know, some are good and some use their magic for good and to heal and to help, and others do use it for evil. And, you know, in some cases, you know, people really were.
This is too much sometimes.
From the broken ruins of Babylon, this is End of Days Radio. I'm your host, Daniel, coming at you all the way from that glistening Emerald City, Seattle, Washington. And the date is August 15th, 2017. Our guest is Gregg Housh. Gregg Housh spent a good portion of his youth evading an FBI task force while helping to operate the internet's foremost pirating rings and being a criminal hacker. In the year 2000, he got caught finally and had to go to court. The next 7 years were spent in and out of court until he pled guilty to conspiracy to violate copyright laws in 2007. He was then thrown into a federal penitentiary. When he got out, he worked a series of computer-related jobs while continuing to participate in various online subcultures. His key role in Anonymous's global protest campaign against the Church of Scientology was made public in 2008. Housh began serving as a media interpreter and interview subject for newspapers, websites, radio, and television as an ambassador for the world-famous internet hacktivist group Anonymous. Whoa, I need to drink a little water after I said all that. Excuse me.
Hello?
Hello, Greg.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Daniel with End of Days Radio.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. We are live right now. Is it okay to begin?
Of course.
Okay, awesome. First thing I'd like to do is just go ahead and ask you, what's new? What's been happening in your world?
Recently, just yesterday, I was downtown. The mayor of Boston, the governor of Massachusetts, and the commissioner of police gave a quick impromptu press conference about the fact that, you know, the Nazis are coming to Boston next weekend, this coming Saturday, actually. And they wanted to address all the public concern about what happened in Charlottesville, and we found out about it at the same time about everyone else did, so we went down to see what was up. And they were very clear on, we don't know anything, we haven't been contacted, no one's tried to get a permit, we don't know. But here's what would happen if they did. And then today we found out that they did actually finally get the permit paperwork today. and the city's going to try and work with them to make sure that it goes off without any violence.
And what are your opinions on all this craziness going on?
Dirty, rotten Nazi scumbags, and free speech is fine, but free speech does not cover hate speech. It's not a thing, and I really am very anti the alt-right. I mean, as anti as I can possibly be.
Do you see this current situation getting worse in the future?
It's weird because I've considered myself friends with people who now end up, on that side. And I mean, everyone from Weave to Cassandra. I mean, I've known them both. I've known Weave for over a decade now. I was there when he got out of prison. Like in New York, we had a little party for him getting out, and he hadn't gotten this bad yet. But I mean, he was bad. He just, it's been a slow kind of decline over 12 years from being just kind of an online troll to now, the CTO of the Daily Stormer. Like, what the hell? And watching people who I do consider intelligent, at least, they're book smart, but morally, obviously, bankrupt at this point, watching that fall and how, in terms of kind of, the world, fast it went, I could see a lot more people following that path, and it kind of scares me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And to get a little bit of an idea of your past and where you're coming from, would you mind just telling me and my listeners a little bit about what your upbringing was like?
Sure. I was born in Dallas, Texas, and my father was a bank robber, drug dealer, car thief, just about everything you could do to make money. He had every scam in the book going. And that was a kind of a wild ride until I was about 4.5, and I only remember vague pieces of it. And then he disappeared and randomly showed up every few years in a stolen car, usually a Lambo, a Ferrari, something of that level, that he was moving between shop houses. And gave me a ride in them and then dropped me back off at the house. And for some reason, my mom let him do it. I mean, I got to say, as a kid, I enjoyed riding in those cars. But, like, at the same time, it was the craziest thing. Because at that point, me and my mom with my sister were just poor as hell. I mean, we had no money. We had nothing. He disappeared on us. No money was flowing back that way. And my mom had no high school education, was working 3 part-time jobs. My sister has cerebral palsy. The bills for her were immense. And it was just, it was rough, but I mean, it was just childhood. It was what it was, I don't complain too much about it, but it's what it was. And I ended up getting into computers when I was about 13, and after really starting to play with them for the first time, it was only about 3 weeks later that I was already programming. I mean, it really just made sense to me. It all just started working. I got a book on BASIC and was, starting to write my own things for the command line. It was an IBM PS2, an actual PS2, not like a clone or anything. That's kind of how I got started.
And would you consider yourself, I mean, that sounds amazing to me, would you consider yourself a computer genius?
I don't know about that. I know a lot of people who are smarter than me with this stuff, but it does all come pretty easy to me.
And when did you start to get into the piracy the piracy side of things?
Early 90s, like 92. Even some into late 91, but mostly 92 on BBSs. And then I got on the internet. I got online a little early. I got online in 92. Before it was made public, through a research account at Texas Christian University, TCU. Funny enough, my mom had actually gone out on a date with one of the professors there, and he had his credentials printed on a card in his wallet, and, I listed his wallet and took the card and put his wallet back. He never changed his password, his login, anything. It was great. And And then they opened it up, and I got, better access about a year later when it was finally really public and everything. But I was doing piracy at that point. I helped, starting groups like Risk ISO, things like that.
And how did you learn the more, I suppose you could call them underground skills?
I had moved out really young and moved up to Kansas City on my own. And I was 14, 15. Yeah, I was just 15 at a time when I met a guy who online was kind of in all of the dark places. He was in all of the places where the real hackers were, where the pirates who, had entire racks of servers sitting at big, co-location facilities were hanging out. And I met him in real life because I went to a 2600 meeting. And the first thing he did was laugh at me because, Linux had been around for like a whole year and a half, and why wasn't I running Linux and on IRC yet? And and I said, well, I'm on IRC, I'm just not on Linux. And he said, well, let's fix that. And he actually helped me install Linux. It was out for just over a year when I got it first installed. And then right when I got on IRC, he invited me into everything. And I guess he just needed a new local friend to him or something, because he went way too fast pulling me into everything. Looking at it now, that was a huge OPSEC failure on his part. He had known me for 5 days when he did that. Sure, I was too young to probably be any operative or anything else, but you know what I mean, right? It was a little quick. But once in, I fell right into it. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was something to do.
How about nowadays? That's really interesting, learning about how you kind of got into Linux for the first time. But in the current moment right now, do you have an operating system of choice?
Depends on the use, actually. I've come to rely. I do a lot of web development and web design, and I get a lot more done sitting on a Mac when I'm doing web dev, and I get a hell of a lot more done when I'm doing server or application dev on Linux. So it really just depends on what I'm going to be working on.
And at what point during your journey did the authorities, mainly the FBI, become interested in what you were doing?
Mid-90s. They started following, of course. At that point, they were already following all of the groups. And Microsoft was pushing them into cyber crime a lot, because things like, Windows 95 leaking in beta builds early, a year and a half before it actually came out, was really upsetting them. And so the FBI was really starting to pay attention at that point, and I had a little bit of a hand in that. Back then I actually had FTP access to one of Microsoft's build servers. So when they would literally finish a build, I could download the install files right then and there. So half of their testers hadn't even seen the build yet, because they were asleep, and I was already downloading the thing.
Holy crap.
That's kind of the time when the FBI started paying a lot more attention.
And how was it that you were able to outsmart them and keep out of their grasps for so long?
A lot of things. It was really down to not using any colloquial speech. So, nothing would give away that I was necessarily an American. My English was obviously good enough that I was probably from England, Canada, America, one of the more native. I could have maybe been Australian, but, for Australians, it seems a little harder to avoid the colloquial speak and the kind of words that really give away your location, whereas with just straight, flat English, you can kind of sound like from anywhere online, as long as, if you're in England and you start, saying bollocks and calling people chavs and whatnot, they're going to know you're probably in England, right? And so I avoided a lot of that. I did almost all of my IRCing and all my other work from hacked boxes in other countries. So I had boxes in Germany and in China, just all over the place, other people's servers that I was actually bouncing through. and a lot of stuff like that. And then just, a lot of vetting of who you were willing to talk to about what you were doing was very important.
And did you have, like, safe houses to operate out of?
Yeah, we had places that were, buildings that had been abandoned but still had power that we would usually, be stealing in some way. And we had good, hackers and freakers and everything else for phone lines and for electricity and all that at that time. It was, compared to today, a lot easier to even do that type of stuff. And so we had a lot of that going on. But then we also had, like, drop shipping locations for any time we needed anything to be shipped to us where it wouldn't come to our houses. And these are places that we could stake out and watch for a while and make sure weren't getting staked out before we sent someone else to pick it up, and just, all kinds of things like that. Like, there were lots of layers to trying to keep yourself safe if you were that deep in things.
Did you ever have any close calls, like any situations where they might have just missed you?
Not here, but they did in the search for a bunch of us actually raid a house in Germany, thinking that that's where we were, because we laid a lot of information out there to tie us to it, just to basically lay that false trail, and they did go to it, and of course we were all different countries.
And at what point did they finally start to actually close in on you?
99. 99 is when they came. I even knew when I was pretty positive of it anyways. There's all these stories out there about, what happened then, but I was rated on the same day that everyone else was from a very specific IRC channel, the actual channel named Wrez, WREZ on EFNet. And we all got raided on the same day except for two people. Two of them got their visits before us, Lot BD and Sparhawk. And what had happened was I had only been in that channel for a month and a half. I'd just been invited in by a couple friends and, asked to hang out. And a lot of these people in that channel had been doing Wrez and the scene and hacking and all that for years, but they had gotten out of the groups. They weren't active anymore. And so they either had access still or they barely had access. And at that point, there was no BitTorrent. There wasn't a simple website you could go to and find anything. Like, if you didn't have access to actual, Wrez sites, it was hard to get stuff at any speed. It might take you weeks to get something that came out in any kind of good copy. And so having access was important. And I, being in all the big groups and running one of the largest private servers out there, had access to everything. So I was sharing with the old schoolers because I kind of felt like the old schoolers should be taken care of, if you will, right? But they had actually set up a server called Shale Gull at a hosting facility where Lot BD worked. And I'm only saying all this because it's all completely public and it all came in court with him and the other people who went down. And one of the other employees at that hosting facility had noticed the amount of traffic coming out of some of the servers that Lot was running. And instead of talking to his coworker, went straight to the FBI and said, "You should check this out." And they, of course, went straight to Lot and said, "So we're going to get all these people now." And Lot helped. The first person to go down was someone called Sparhawk, who was helping provide hardware. He was giving them enough hard drives to run this server. So, he had shipped stuff directly there, and so they just went straight to him. And so they'd been monitoring this server and all the people in that channel and then other ancillary people related to it, because there were some people who weren't in that channel on the server that let in some other people from the scene who were kind of helping upload to it so they would have stuff to download from it, right? And so the repercussions kind of went far. But they were watching that server, and they had started watching that server and actually hit Lot before I ever showed up. But I didn't know. I show up and they say, "Oh, here's a server." They're all these old schoolers. They've been around a long time. Everyone vouches. So I'm just hanging out. I set up a script to auto-upload the latest uploads literally the second they came out to that server for them. And the login it was using was mine. So like 2/3 of the uploads to their server had my handle on it. And so at that point, the FBI think, who the hell is this guy uploading that much, stolen, stuff? And when they busted me, they were like, you uploaded 5 bajillion, megs. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't upload any of that. A script that, was just running on this piece of software on someone else's server that happened to use my account was doing that. I didn't even run the bot that was running the script. Like, I did none of that. And they were like, but we have these logs. And I'm like, yeah, I did none of that. You put me on a lie detector. I did none of that. And that really upset them because they thought they had a lot on me. And turns out, like, I had uploaded, like, 1 file once to that server personally. But still, that led them to me instantly. I was making really good friends at that time with Sparhawk in the channel, and it turns out we weren't that far from each other, and I was living in Chicago at the time, and he was going to be coming through Chicago, and he wanted to hang out. And, after all of the people had vouched, after he had actually sent hardware to things, after everything was just going so well, I let my guard down a little, and I decided to meet him. And we hung out, and looking back at it, it was like the biggest OPSEC failure I had ever done. He chose the place to meet. He made sure it was very public. We sat outside on the outside table instead of the inside table. And that, he set everything up so I could be watched. Like they were sitting somewhere in one of the cars right by the place, obviously, and he was handing me over on a silver platter.
So I imagine at some point they must have...
at it and I know.
So at some point they must have caught him and turned him, I imagine.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, he was the guy sending a lot of the hardware to this place, so they got him pretty easy because he was just shipping it from his house. With his home address and name and everything, because he thought Lot BD was safe. And so that gets everyone busted. Like, I mean, they showed up at my house at 6 a.m. and just it took them like 8 hours to go through everything and just take all my stuff and then take me away in cuffs.
And what was it like for you this is such a fascinating story. I'm wondering what it was like for you from a psychological perspective. I mean, you're on the run, you're probably having a good time, and all of a sudden you're busted. Does life become a living hell at that point?
It does for a few reasons. I mean, not just getting busted. I mean, getting busted means like the things I was doing every day that I was honestly profiting a little off of, but also like just for fun. Like, and all the people I was hanging out with as friends, I mean, I couldn't get near anyone. I was like, cut off. And that was definitely weird and bad. Anything I was actually just doing for fun. Like, I considered half of what I was doing online my hobbies, and they were all taken from me. And so, yeah, it really sucked. And it took them 7 years of fighting with me and my lawyer to finally get me in front of a judge because, all of the case they had built up against me was all based on, quite obviously, just unbelievably faulty information. And they were still at that point doing their calculations on damages based on, well, Adobe Photoshop costs exactly $500 in the store, and they downloaded 100 copies, so you caused $500,000 in damage. Simple math. There you go. That's how we do that math.
Meanwhile, everybody downloads that one
through my lawyer that's BS.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, I remember at that time, everybody was pirating Photoshop.
Yeah, I mean, no one could afford that. And the thing was with Photoshop that, and this is really the selling point that ended up actually, if you look at my paperwork, there's people who have stupid websites out there about me that say, like, I turned and everything, but you won't find a single actual case where I gave evidence. There's not one. You can't find the paperwork. It doesn't exist. You won't find a single case where I went on the stand against anyone else who got busted that day. Not one. Didn't happen. Ever. All of those records are unsealed from every one of those cases. So go digging. I never turned. What actually ended up happening that got me my variance when I ended up with such a short time was, one, the judge was really pissed off at the prosecution for having me just waving out there in the air for 7 years, not knowing when I was actually going to get tried or not. And, right to a speedy trial was a joke at that point. And then through my fighting, I made it very clear that I knew what I had done, that I was willing to plead guilty to what I had done, and that I believed I deserved jail time. But I would not accept their math that was obviously being done by a first grader because those damage numbers were wrong. And after almost a year and a half of arguing that through my lawyers, I actually got to sit down with the AUSA, the head attorney for the United States, and lay out for him, the simple facts of it, which it blew my mind. His eyes opening when I explained it to him, it was like no one had ever told him this, and I don't believe that. But he gave me that look like this is the first time anyone had explained it properly to him. And all I said was, look, if 1,000 people download this $500 piece of software, 900 of them couldn't have afforded it. 90 of them might maybe be able to make it work, but wouldn't buy it because it's so expensive. 10 maybe missed sales at most, maybe. If you even come close to taking 1% of the number of downloads and counting those as lost sales, you are exaggerating. And I laid it out for him a lot more, it was like a 3-hour conversation compared to like that few seconds, but I really laid it out for him. And in the end, he was integral a year later in reworking the federal guidelines where that math was changed and where the schedules of what your offense was based on that math specifically was also lowered, which helped my case a lot because it changed my mandatories and everything down a few levels. I think I dropped like 3 levels because of that.
And once you actually did have to go to prison, what was that like for you? Did you ever have any really tough situations where you maybe had to fight somebody?
No. It was interesting. In court, the judge really raked them over the rails. He yelled at the prosecution for how long it took for me to get here, the fact that they weren't letting me hold down a steady job, that my life was blah, blah, blah. Like, my lawyer had really laid into the judge about what had happened, and he just turned it on them. So I think the prosecution, the FBI, everyone else were pretty mad at the fact that they wanted, many years of my life, and I ended up getting a 6-month sentence. The judge was just, it was one of those days I had the judge on my side, and it was a freaking miracle. When I went in, they sent me to a pretty bad prison, Fort Devens. It's an FMC, which means it's a medical. They have a hospital attached. And so what happens at these FMCs is, let's say you're at Leavenworth and you get into a brawl and you end up like killing a guard, but you get seriously injured. They ship you to one of the ones that has an FMC, the actual medical, so they can deal with your injuries. And then since you're transferred to that one now, you just go out into general population there. And so what you end up with is that these federal mechs that are FMCs is populations full of people who had to go to the hospital while they were inside. And usually it's for fights, for murders, for everything else. It's not a good place. And I don't know if they sent me there on purpose or not, but what they did do is right when I went inside, I went into solitary, and I was in solitary for 27 straight days before they let me out into the population. And that 27 days of solitary was not fun.
What began happening inside of your mind as you were in the solitary? Were things kind of breaking down for you? Did you hallucinate? Did you just meditate? How was it?
Yeah, I had never actually really had that type of an experience before, even intentionally through some kind of meditation or something else. Like, I'd never had this, sensory deprivation I was going through. I mean, the guards wouldn't talk to me when they came to the door to, like, drop off my food. I didn't have light. There was a little crack in the door. And they were, and I put this in air quotes, out of pillows. So I had no pillow. My head was just on the hard steel slab that was freezing cold here in, Massachusetts. And you put all that together, and sleep was really hard to come by. And I really could never honestly tell what time of day it was. I was probably about 2 weeks in, like 12, 13 days when I started hallucinating. And it wasn't like big things. It's not like, I saw some guy enter the room at that point. But just my vision was really starting to get messed up, and I was seeing colors, and I was seeing some light that just wasn't there. And it was another week or so in that I started actually kind of seeing figures, in the darkness that weren't there. And that was all not fun, I got to tell you. I did not enjoy that time at all. Felt very tortured.
And you might have mentioned this, but why exactly did they put you in there for that long? Is that even legal? What's going on there?
So they claimed to be out of beds, but they had the special housing unit, which is called the SHU, which is a place you can be put while they're waiting on beds in general pop. And they did not put me in there. They put me specifically in solitary in the hole. And so, I mean, that was just an outright lie. I always assumed during it, and maybe this is some kind of victim mentality, but I just assumed that the looks that I was getting leaving the courtroom from the agents and from the attorneys for the government that looked, I mean, they were eye daggers. Like, they heard 6 months and, wanted to walk out of the place and shoot me is what it looked like in their faces, right? And
I see.
I always thought they called in a favor. And did that to me as kind of extra punishment for how short my sentence was going to be.
What was it like when they finally let you out of the solitary? Did it take you a little while to calm down and get back to normal?
Yeah. I mean, it took a good 4 days for me to really, it's going to sound weird, but fully grasp, a morning and a night, and them being distinct. So I could wake up and go to sleep. It was, it's surprising how fast a lot of that stuff just becomes unnatural to you. And so it took me a good 4 days to really get a feel for some of that back. But what surprised me the most, and this is the weird thing, is that a lot of people in general pop knew I had been in there. Guards always talk to a lot of people in there and everything. And so it had spread that, there was a guy sitting in solitary for this long that was just in there and, that hadn't even been in general pop yet. So it's not like he came out and then punched a, security guard and ended up, in there for a week or something, And so I walked into general pop the first time and a couple people just came over to me and were like, "You're the guy who's been in solitary all this long?" Holy, And it was surprising to me because one, you kind of see just instantly the self-segregation going on. There was definitely an area that was white, an area that was black, and an area that was in some honestly racist self-segregation in my mind at the time, Asian, and all of the Asians were kind of standing over there. You know what I mean? They had seemingly done it themselves, though. I learned that was just kind of how it is in the prison population, right? But
yeah.
The people who would come over to me was one white guy and one black guy who were kind of the first to talk to me as I came in. And the first couple days I was sort of left alone, but I learned how it worked where, you have a commissary account and you're going to have to get some money put on it so you can get some pens and some paper if you want to write home and, all that type of crap. And I guess due to my ordeal or something else, people in there kind of felt a little pity on me. And it was the strangest thing because some of the people who were acting like they wanted to help, I mean, one of the guys who wanted to help me, he gave me a pen and a pad of paper, which, sure, they're not that expensive from the commissary, but still, when you have things like that, they have a way more value inside there than they do anywhere else, And he had this giant swastika tattooed right in the center of his head and was as Aryan Nation as you could imagine. And it was blowing my mind that him, and then there was a Chinese guy who helped me out with some of the food I would eat for the first couple days. I mean, I ended up, of course, paying him back, and he made sure that I knew that was the case when he gave it to me. But he was the first to offer, And it turned out being okay for me in there. I guess the introduction to general pop being the way it was, where they were more in awe of the fact that I had just spent 27 days in solitary, that kind of helped me, I guess. Although it was, still looking back, I would have preferred not to have.
Were you, when you were, after being sent into solitary and all that, did it ever cross your mind that somebody might even kill you to keep you from getting out?
I didn't go that far with it. I thought, honestly, I mean, and this is really where I was in my head. I was thinking, because I wasn't getting any updates, I was thinking I was going to be stuck in solitary for just my whole sentence because it was so short. I thought that's how they were going to treat me. When they came to tell me that I was being brought over to General Pop, I mean, I had 5 minutes notice from them telling me to it's starting to happen, like, you know, get your shit together so you can leave the room. And yeah, when I got right into General Pop, having a couple people come up and start to just interact with me in a relatively human fashion. You know, it's a little different in there, what you consider kind of more human and more nice, you know, like the levels are a little off. You know, in some instances, the guy didn't punch me was really nice of him, you know, whereas out here in public, it's a little different. And, but I never feared for my life while I was in there. There were a couple times I got some threats, but the funniest thing happened about a month into me being in General Pop. A guy who I used to know outside in Boston, Chris, this Chinese guy who was a poker player who I knew, and he had disappeared like a year ago, and no one knew, you know, why. No one had any answers, any of our friends or anything, so we just were like, okay, bye, Chris. He walks up to me out of nowhere and is like, what are you doing in here? And I'm like, what are you doing in here? And he had just gotten transferred into this one, and it looks like he'd been in a couple of them for a while, but he was, when I had known him, this really small Chinese guy who just, you know, had no bulk. And here he is standing in front of me, a guy that I think could bend the steel with his arms. I mean, his biceps were gigantic. And he just was blunt about it. I was doing and selling lots of steroids. I was like, oh, well, that explains everything, I guess. And he said, what do you need? And I said, everyone's being all right with me right now. And he said, there's no one in here I'm scared of. If anyone actually wants to fuck with you, just tell me. And at that point, I had a guy who probably could have punched anyone out that was in the entire place out cold. And they all knew that he would do it if they came at me. So that made it even a lot easier.
And what was it like leading up to your release? Were you really getting excited about knowing that you're finally going to get out of there?
It's weird. I'm going to tell you. I wanted out. You know, in all the real sense of it, I did want out. But at the same time, I knew I was coming out to a world that a lot of my past would have to just be my past. That people who I had considered friends for decades were gone. Hobbies that I had had for decades were gone. Half of the skill sets I had built up had to do with breaking the law, and I was going to be watched, you know, like a hawk for probably the rest of my life. That's just what I thought. So I didn't know how to think about, you know, what it was going to be when I got out. Because at one point you just want out. I mean, it's not a good thing to stay in prison. Prison sucks. But on the other hand, I was like, at least here, like, I know what my day is going to be. This is pretty easy to get along with right now. And out there, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, what can I do for fun? Do I have to go start playing sports again? Like, what am I going to do for entertainment, right? It was weird.
And then once you do actually get released, what was the day like when you actually walked the heck out of there?
Oh, that was a whole different story. There was a job that I had taken part-time before I went in just for something to do, and they were really harassing me, the government, on what I was allowed to do computer-wise and what I wasn't. And so I'd taken a computer repair job, like, you know, just literally Geek Squad style freaking repairing people's computers, like, you know, getting the viruses off of grandma's machine and stuff, like stuff I could do in my sleep, but it was paying the bills for a little bit. The company was run by this man who just, for some reason or another, I don't know what it was, treated me better than his own son. It was the craziest thing. And one of my coworkers from that job is actually the person who picked me up from prison. And I didn't know really what was happening. I knew they wanted to talk to me about maybe coming back to work for them or not. but I didn't know specifically that I, still had that job. And when I got in the car with him, he smiled and, asked me how I liked the vehicle, and we started driving off. And I said, so I need to do this, I need to do this, I got to be at my PO in the morning, someone said they were talking to you, do you know what the plan, I was freaking out, right? Because you've got all these things that you have to get done. If you're not at the PO the next morning, you are in trouble, they can rearrest you. So you've just all these, and he says, don't worry about it, I've been making phone calls all day, I've got everything lined up, we're good. And I said, am I still living? And he was like, no. Dave, the boss of that company, Charlie got a new place, and Dave's got you as his roommate. Charlie's cool with it. Charlie was another one of our coworkers. So while I was inside, Charlie got a 2-bedroom apartment and was waiting for me to get out, and I did not know this while I was inside. My first response was, you could have told me that. That would have, eased a lot of my thoughts about what I was going to do when I got out. But so he was driving me to my apartment, and they had worked with my old roommate before I had gone away. I had left him the key to my storage locker where I put all my stuff. And they had already gotten all of my stuff out and moved it over to that apartment. And since I didn't have any money or no bank account, I had nothing. I mean, I literally came out with the $100 that they give you leaving that prison. So there, I've got that, and that's all I have to my name. He hands me my first paycheck saying, this is what the boss gave me, and it's not even forward pay, I'm not going to get paid next week because I got this one. It's the paycheck for the last 2 weeks that I wasn't even working. And I'm looking at him what's this? And he's like, it's your paycheck, so you're fine for, the next couple weeks. You can go get some clothes, you can get, some food. And I'm losing my mind because I have no idea what's going on. And then he tells me that this is a company car that we're in and that I'm going to get to use it for the next few months until I can, get my own and all that. And I can't thank Dave enough. He made that day and that transition easier than I think anyone has a right to wish for. I mean, I had a car, I had an apartment, all my stuff was already at it, and I had my first paycheck, and I had a job. I mean, the craziest thing happened the next morning. I went to the PO, and, my officer, and I'm sitting there, and I'm meeting her for the first time, and she's going over my conditions, and it's all, you can't do this, you got to do this, you have to check in with me once a week. We do a drug test randomly every other one of those weeks, and I'm going to call you and tell you when you got to come in for those. And she starts going down this list of, you need job training, you need all these other things. And I just said, can I interrupt you? I don't want to be rude. And right, I didn't want to piss off my PO the very first time I met her, right? And so she says, okay, what do you have to say? And I said, I have a job. I start as soon as I leave here. And then I pointed out the window to the parking lot, and I said, do you see the yellow car over there? That's mine. My boss gave it to me for the next 3 months. It's got insurance. Here's my wallet full of cash because I just cashed my paycheck. Here's my address. And why do I have random drug testing? I've never had a single drug in my life. I've never even tasted alcohol once in my life. What is this about? And she's just looking at me with this look of disbelief, right? So she has to call my boss. She has to do all these things to verify that this crazy talk I'm talking is true. And once she believes it, she comes back and says, come back tomorrow morning, first thing. So I left, and I came back the next morning, and she had worked with the judge to get my conditions changed. She said, there's no random drug testing, and I'm going to call you once a month and just check in on you, and that's all you got. And I'm like, okay, really? Is this legal? So, I owe everything to that one man. I mean, he made my transition so simple.
And when and how did you first find out about Anonymous?
I mean, I'd known about it before I even went away. I mean, I had taken part in a few things, just playing around on 4chan, like the Hal Turner raid, stuff like that. The initial Havo raid, but, all that fun stuff back then. But it was just a small group of people trolling, and that was about it. It wasn't this thing. until January 2008. A group of about eight of us got together on an IRC after one of us posted to 4chan saying, everyone meet over here, we're going to repost this Tom Cruise video. And the eight of us talked that evening about, how we were going to get more people to help us, and we started uploading it. And, that turned into Project Chanology, which turned into the real first, large-scale event that Anonymous really did. And throughout the organizing of Chanology, a lot of the initial logos, the mottos, the expect us came from that. The Church of Scientology with the zero in the of YouTube account where the videos like the message to Scientology are and things like that. That's my YouTube. So a lot of that, I helped kind of craft. I still have rough drafts of the first time we drew the logo with the laurel leaves around the outside of it and the UN globe behind it. I still have all those .ai files.
And why was it that you guys decided to go after the Church of Scientology?
The honest answer, they would fight back, and that was, what's the point of trolling someone, especially someone of that size, if they're not going to fight with you, right? If they're just going to ignore or disappear, you don't get any fun out of it. There's no lulls there. So we first went after them because they took that Tom Cruise video down when it was absolutely fair and right for it to be up. We weren't as righteous as that sounds. We did just think it'd be funny to piss them off by putting it back up since they seemed to want it taken down. But it became, over the next week, this fight of, no, this is legally right to stay up. You cannot DMCA this. It is within fair use rights. Screw you guys. And it became a lot bigger than it was originally. Originally, it was just a troll that we thought would last a couple weeks. And then, Chanology goes on for years, and it spawns into all these other ops and all these other missions we do and all the political stuff.
And being somebody that's been right there up close to it, what do you think of some of these people that have these conspiracy theories that Anonymous is actually a government group?
Well, I think there's a lot of stupid people in this world, and I think a lot of them have opinions like that. It's asinine. Literally, like, for that specifically, the size, like, the Anonymous that people know now really was kind of born out of Chanology. That was the first kind of event that solidified a lot of the ominous nature and took it out of the old hate machine and into this more of a movement kind of a thing. And we were literally just, making mistakes every day, all day, that kind of turned out to be the right thing to do that day to make Anonymous a little bigger. There was no planning. It was not well thought out. Like, we uploaded the Message to Scientology video on January 21st, 2008 at about 10 p.m. I hit the button and I went to sleep. And I woke up the next day and it was hitting just close to 1 million views. It was being aired on CNN, and the chat server we were telling everyone to go to in the description was down because so many people were trying to connect to it that we had basically DDoSed ourselves. None of what we were doing was planned or orchestrated by some government. We were just seriously fucking up on a daily basis, but it turned out that the mistakes and the things we got wrong was actually us getting it right, I guess, because, we built something.
Are you shocked to see how large scale and famous the whole thing has become?
In a way, a lot of that shock has already left me. There were events where things got really crazy. The first real major political event for Anonymous, there were a couple attempts at little things, but the first big one was about a year after Chanology. It was called Operation Titstorm, and it was about Australia trying to censor the internet. They wanted to get a firewall and a filtering system in place, much like China or Saudi Arabia or Iran have. And they had tried to pass this thing 5 times, and it wasn't passing, so they were coming up with new scare tactics. And this time, their scare tactic to try and convince the public that this was needed was to tell the public that we needed to filter out women who had small breasts, specifically A cup or smaller, from the internet, because if men kept looking at naked women with small boobs, that would lead them to become pedophiles who like children. That was their argument. Now, we all know how unbelievably asinine that argument is, but they were just trying to scare people into thinking that the internet was creating pedophiles. And I just think, a lot of times with pedophiles, that's kind of more just who they are, and they discovered it long before they saw some, 30-year-old with A cups. They're horrible people, and I hope they all, get shot in the face personally, but that's a personal opinion. So they were doing that, and this guy shows up on our IRC, and we were still really focused centrally on Chinology. And someone points him in my direction because that person knew that I had been integral in the initial videos, in organizing the very first protest we did, things like that, and said, "This is the guy you want to talk to if you want to do something about this." He comes to me, and I said, "I have no idea why you're talking to me. What do I know?" And he's like, "Well, I need to tell the world that we're going to stop this law." And I was like, "Okay, what do you want me for?" He's like, "Well, how do I do that?" And, we went back and forth with me being just utterly ignorant of the actual kind of power at that point of, Anonymous and kind of the machine we had built for an hour and a half while. He said, "Well, how do I put a press release together?" And I would say, "Oh, well, the guy who wrote the last one for me is on IRC right now. You want me to get him?" And I got him and a couple of his friends into an IRC channel, and I brought the guy from Australia in. And then one of them said, "We're going to need a video for this thing." And I said, "Oh, well, the guy who made that video, just one of the other Anon videos, is actually online right now. Want me to grab him?" And these people were coming in because they had all worked with me on other ops and whatnot, so they all, we trusted each other, and they liked, the things I was working on. We just had a bond, so they were willing to come check this out. And by the end of, another 2 hours or so, this channel had, 50 creative people in it, building a video, writing a script, writing a couple press releases, getting some hackers ready. And I went to sleep thinking that I had not done too terribly much. And the next morning at home, I'd been doxxed a few months earlier by Scientology, so my information was all over the internet. So the next morning, I got a phone call from a senator in Australia from that office, from one of his assistants who was a little better at the internet than he was. And then that assistant put the assistant and the senator on the phone, and I'm just some dude, I'm not some guy who's supposed to be talking to world leaders, right? That's not my bag. I built websites for a living out of my bedroom. Who am I, right? And so this kind of bothers me for a second. Isn't there someone who's supposed to be having this phone call that went to college for this? But I take the call and I'm like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "Can you make it stop?" And I'm like, "I was asleep. I don't know what you're talking about." And he said, "There's already a bunch of websites down. There's people in the streets holding up signs that say horrible things we heard you know these people." And I'm like, "Oh man, they went quick. What's happening? Let me get online." And so I walk over to my computer and I start to figure out what's going on. And there are in Melbourne, Perth, and Adelaide. There's already street protests going on. There's a video that is now starting to play on news and getting tweeted around everywhere and shown around, and everything's starting to blow up. And then some of the government websites in Australia are offline, and I'm just thinking to myself, holy crap, what did we do? A senator from, and I told him, "Look, I don't have any control over these people. That's not how Anonymous or any of these real online hacktivists work. I can go suggest that they slow it down if you tell me something that'll make them happy, but I can't just go tell them to stop. They will just kick me out of the channel. There's no real power. It's just you're as helpful and useful as you are at the moment. And if at the moment I'm telling them to stop, then I'm out." So after I explained that to him and he kind of got it, it was a Xenophon, which was hilarious that was his name. He said, "Well, we're gonna have some long talks today and tomorrow about it and try and come up with a way to maybe modify the law." And I said, "Look, if this thing passes in any way, expect every email spool from every one of you to go public and all of your websites to go down, and that to be just the opening attack. It gets worse from there. And he says, is that a threat? And I said, no, I'm just telling you what other people are going to do. Like, I don't have control of these people. And we get off the phone, and I go tell everyone what happened, and they're like, well, shit, okay, we're making let's go harder. We're obviously, and I got a call only like 4 hours later saying we're talking about how to back out of this bill. And the vote on the bill was, this was a Tuesday at that point. The vote was only the next Monday, so like the vote wasn't that far out. And over the next couple of days, as the Titstorm people learned more about the fact that the bill was probably going to not pass, they started backing off. And a couple of the big leaks that could have happened were held back because senators kept coming out publicly saying they weren't going to vote for this. And the pre-polling said that 87% of the Senate was going to vote this in. And on the day that the vote happened, after that week of anonymous, only 14% voted for it. And so the bill did not pass. And, you know, that next week was really weird for a lot of the people involved, especially like me, because we hadn't thought about using this thing that we were kind of putting together and this ominous beast that had kind of built up around us to just take a government on. And here we were taking a nation state on and winning a battle over legislation. That's when it hit me that this was something bigger than we had intended it ever to be. It had grown, you know, far larger than we had any talent to actually do intentionally.
Is hacktivism the way of the future, considering how government is using more and more technology to spy on the people?
Yeah. I mean, I think we need more and more hacktivists. I mean, we also need more just general activists, too, but we need more leakers, more whistleblowers, more hacktivists, more hackers. We need it all because everything will be online more and more. I mean, just I can walk into people's houses and talk to their house now, and it does things. Like, it's only going to keep getting worse.
And how did you end up becoming a consultant for the hit show Mr. Robot?
That actually was due to my consulting work on House of Cards, which was interesting how I kind of got there. A bunch of the actors from House of Cards ended up working on Mr. Robot, and the showrunners from Mr. Robot and House of Cards are friends too. So after working on House of Cards, they all told Mr. Robot they should talk to me. So I was very thankful for that help there. But what actually got me into all of that was the craziest freaking thing. I am watching House of Cards Season 1 with my wife. We are in our bedroom sitting there binge watching on a Saturday afternoon. And we are on episode 7 of Season 1. We had watched all 6 up till then just in one shot with, like, food delivered and everything. We were true binge watching, right? And I got a phone call. And the guy on the other end said he was Beau Willimon. And here I am watching, you know, House of Cards on Netflix, right? So I laughed. I said, I don't know who this is, but whoever's in my Netflix account, get out, and hung up on him. I thought it was one of my hacker friends watching the fact that I was watching this show and then calling to screw with me. So I hung up on Beau. And they ended up tweeting at me, emailing me from their production domain, and then calling me back again over the next, like, 3 hours. And I was like, maybe that could actually be them. I'm going to take this call. And we talked for a little while, and he just said, look, we want to get a lot of this right, and you know what you're doing, it seems, since you kind of helped start a lot of this. And I was like, okay, I've never worked on TV or anything else. He's like, I'll handle structure, I'll handle script, you'll make sure I get it right, and when I need scenes that I haven't written yet, we'll talk about them, and you'll help me write the right scene. And I was like, okay, that I can do. And he brought me down, and I got to go down to Baltimore and be on set with him and the whole cast, like Kevin Spacey and everyone else, for a few weeks. And it was a lot of fun. And then it just turned out that a lot of people actually liked the work I had done, and I guess I'm okay at it. And so when they went over to, like, the president from the first season of House of Cards went over to become the boss at his company in Mr. Robot. And then the FBI agent in House of Cards, played by Jeremy Holm, ended up both of them and Bo Willimon told the people at Mr. Robot to hire me. And all my friends hate me because I actually got to see the pilot to Mr. Robot about 9 months before it aired.
Is the character Elliot, Mr. Robot, is he based off of you?
No. The character Gavin in House of Cards is based mostly off of me. Elliot is an amalgamation of a bunch of people, but I'll tell you, Sam and Core Adana, but Sam Esmail and Core Adana are just geniuses. Like, Sam and Chad being the producer, called me, many months before it happened to try and introduce me to this character idea that Sam had. And he had already really well described him using a lot of what you could learn by just following Anons and the other hacktivist types, right? And just seeing the ones that had already been busted even, you could just literally see, there's an Anon, there's the type of clothes he wears, right? And so he had done a lot of work to study up on this. And when they showed me the initial pilot script, I read through it and called them back, and I said that reading Elliot really felt, like I was reading about 20 other people that I know. Like, I know Elliot. Elliot is a real human being. I know this person. I know everything about this person. Like, you have written an honest-to-goodness hacker. I know this guy. And that made them really happy that they had actually hit the nail on the head on that one. And then I learned that, USA Networks is owned by NBC, and NBC doesn't allow the hiring of felons. Although, good old Christian Slater, a felon. But they looked the other way for him. So I actually had to be hired through a consulting firm whose name appears in shit instead of mine for a while because they couldn't directly hire me.
And I take it you've met and talked to Rami Malek a little bit. What is he like?
Rami's awesome. Just the nicest guy. He's funny. He's quick-witted. Not quiet at all. He's Elliot is amazing acting. I will tell you that, because that is not him.
And how realistic would you say that this show is compared to the real world of hacktivism?
I mean, I think, they've gone off on this alternate reality tangent where they took down the financial institutions the way they did. I think in the real world you have all these bad characters. They just aren't like, the Chinese hackers, this one specifically. That's not how they really are. They're very controlled government entities. There's not just some random person who, walks around saying those are his sister's dresses, who is, being all weird at the world. That's just, that type of stuff is of course, a stretch, to say the least. But when you look at, like, the hacking itself and whatnot, a lot of the stuff that is typed into a computer on screen on that show is stuff you can really do. I mean, half the times the tools they're using, thanks to Core and Mark, are real tools. And it was interesting that the lawyers had to be talked to a lot, the lawyers for USA Network, before they were allowed to actually show, like, real tool names and them typing in real things that could, if, you had control of that server, issue commands and whatnot. Because the lawyers at first were like, we don't want to, like, show a hack and then have someone watching the show pause the screen and then go do that hack. It took a while to get them to allow all that through.
I was thinking that one time because I remember seeing, at the time it was called Kali Linux, and seeing that. I'm not a hacker or anything, but, I'll mess around with Linux a little bit, and I saw that pop up on there. I was thinking, oh my God, everybody's going to know what that is.
Right? Oh. Yeah, I thought it was great. I just think they've done such a good job with the show. I've been really lucky to work on it. When they asked me to do a cameo, it was the craziest thing. I'd never, like, been in front of the camera, so, like, it was very weird feeling.
And
And there I am, like a novice, like I've never even attempted to act, and they've got me standing there yelling at a character who is being played by Meryl Streep's daughter, who has learned from literally one of the best actresses ever in the history of acting. And that's my first scene. I'm opposite Meryl Streep's daughter. Like, that's not even fair.
Yeah, I can only imagine that must have been a really awesome experience.
I was intimidated. Oh, it was great. Like, you look at it as a credit, that's awesome. Look at you sharing a scene with her. But like, to me, I was intimidated as hell.
And what about the part where Elliot is throwing all of his parts in the microwave? Is there reality to that?
Yeah. I mean, you definitely want to fry as much stuff as you can if you think they're coming. Microwaves do a great job of destroying that stuff. I mean, there are other, better ways to do it if you've got the time, but that way works.
And do you have a favorite ever episode of the show?
Honestly, the pilot. The very first episode, man. That introduction is just, to me, that's everything. Like, it sets the groundwork and it gets everyone on board.
Yeah, it's certainly a fantastic show. It's actually currently my favorite show. I just can't get enough of it. I can't wait for it to start up again.
Season 3 is coming.
And
you should see the NDA I have to sign. I think if I read it more clearly, it would say that they can, murder me if I say anything.
Yeah, that's a show that really kind of unravels. It's very similar to something like Fight Club, where you have all these moments where it's like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit.
Yeah. Every 5 minutes, you're like, where did that come from? One of the funnier moments for me was, last season, spoiler alert, but, the whole way he was in jail, that whole thing.
Yeah.
The internet had kind of guessed that might be an option, that might be a thing that was happening on Reddit, but everyone shot them down as that being dumb, and so it kind of disappeared. But when that appeared on Reddit, my wife came to me and said, if that's true and you didn't tell me, and just told me that there would be consequences. And I couldn't say anything. The NDA was very clear, and I just didn't know if I told her, then one of her friends found out. I just didn't know, so I wasn't going to say anything.
And how about the overall message of the show? Are you of the philosophy that these global multinational corporations, are they just completely out of control and raping the world and society?
I don't think any company deserves or needs to have nearly $400 billion in cash on hand. I mean, every bit of what these companies are doing, or everything that they're lobbying for, only extends the inequality, the wealth gap. I mean, every bit of what these giant corporations does is bad for the world, I believe.
And what about, being that you're somebody that initially got started in the world of piracy, you always hear in the news, such and such torrent site got busted. What do you think of sites like the Pirate Bay, for example, Pirate Bay, that's still up and running and they can't seem to do anything to take them down? Do you support sites like the Pirate Bay?
I do. I am a big fan of the Pirate Bay and all the others. I've actually found myself in a strange position with all of this, where I've actually gotten to have talks with industry about where I stand on this. And I've always argued that I don't really pirate music anymore because Spotify just works. It has literally everything I want at a price I think is fair. You win. No need for me to pirate anymore. Now, on the movie side, half the time I want to watch a movie, it's not on demand, it is not on Netflix, and it is not on Hulu. Screw you guys. I'm going to have to go find it another way. But if you had put it on one of those services, I subscribed to them and tried. And this whole argument of piracy really doesn't get defeated through, technological genius. It doesn't get defeated in the courts. It gets defeated by giving the population what they want in the format they want at a price point people can afford. You do that, and the amount of piracy of your product will drop immensely. And the people who are still pirating at that point, you were never going to get any money from in the first place.
Yeah, all very good points. How about the whole Bitcoin phenomena? Do you have any thoughts or opinions on Bitcoin?
Being somewhat upset about, having a lot of it when it was worth like 5 cents and getting rid of it when it was worth like $1 because I thought, this was pointless and now it's worth like 4,000. My thoughts are I wish I still had all those.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how about...
Go ahead. That's a big loss. That's a big loss. I do think it's interesting watching it spiking so high in the last few weeks. I think it's going to crash again. I just, who knows to how far.
And what about the dark web? Have you gone on there or experimented with that at all?
Yeah, of course. A lot. I know Tor devs. I know I2P devs. I know a lot of these people. I'm actually, funny enough, I'm really good friends with Ross Ulbricht's mother, Lynn. I talk with her quite often. It's really sad what happened to Ross because he didn't do half the stuff they say he did. And there were multiple Dread Pirate Roberts running that site, not just him. And they pinned a lot on him that he just didn't do. And it's sad because he got railroaded.
And we are finally, unfortunately, we're approaching the bottom of the hour and the end of the interview. But Greg, I'd like to go ahead and at this point just open things up. And if you'd like to, feel free to get on the soapbox one more time and just say whatever you'd like to my listeners out there. And of course, feel free to go ahead and follow that up with anything at all that you would like to plug or promote.
Sure. At this time, I think the most important thing for anyone to be talking about and paying attention to is the rise of the alt-right. And if you find yourself on that side, like I've learned over the last few days, some people I considered friends do, you have to ask yourself, if you do not consider yourself a white supremacist, if you do not consider yourself a Nazi, but you do consider yourself enough of that group of people, whatever it happens to be, that you want to show up somewhere like Charlottesville or somewhere like Boston this coming weekend, then the real question is, why do all the Nazis and white supremacists agree with you so much that they want to be there with you? What are you doing wrong that you guys share enough beliefs that this is a joint rally that you're at? If you do not identify as one of them, but they are now your friends, you might want to rethink your points of view. You might want to put more thought into what you're doing. It seems that you might have something wrong. And I think it's just really important for people on that side who do not consider themselves Nazis to wonder why all the Nazis think they're friends. That is important. That is my soapbox this week. As for plugging, just for all the podcast listeners here, I have my own podcast, which can be listened to over at gregghoush.com. We're up to episode 20 now. We'll be doing 21 in a couple days. I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. We're still learning as we go, of course, being so young at it, but having fun with it. You should come check it out. We interview hacktivists. We interviewed the chief of police. We've got an interview with a mayor and a governor coming up next month. Just the craziest things for, someone in my position to be interviewing. But they're interesting because I get them to talk about things that they probably shouldn't be talking about.
All right, very cool. And you said that was gregghoush.com?
Yep, GREGGHOUSH.com.
Okay, fantastic. I will definitely be checking that out. It was a great honor to speak with you today, especially knowing that you're involved with Mr. Robot. That's just my favorite show. And I would love to, some point in the future, I'd love to talk to you again.
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Thank you once again. And Greg, I wish you luck with your show and everything. And until we talk again, you have a great day.
You too. Thanks for having me. All right, bye.
Bye. And there you have it. That was Gregg Housh. Wow. What can I even say about that? Oh my God. I mean, to have the roots of Anonymous talked about on this program and have it all laid out like that, I never thought that anything like this would be happening. And I can say that this is one of my proudest moments ever on this show, was being able to interview somebody like that that's been through what he's been through. And I highly recommend everybody go check out his program, because I sure as heck enjoyed that interview, and I wouldn't mind listening to that guy for another multiple hours. But I do need to take a break again. I am getting a little bit fatigued, just a little bit, not too much, but I'm going to go ahead and play some more music. I'm going to freshen up a little bit, and I'm going to come right back here because this show's not over yet. And we've got a whole wrap-up portion to do to close out and plenty of things to talk about. So I will talk to you soon.
Raising consciousness and awakening mankind. This is End of Days Radio. Hello and welcome back to the End of Days. I'm your host Daniel, returning to you once again on this beautiful Tuesday, August 15th, 2017. Just got off the phone with Gregg Housh, one of the best interviews of all time. Just amazing, start to finish. Oh my God, I feel almost like I'm buzzing from that, like I'm floating on cloud nine. But there are some things that we need to cover, so let's do that. Remember that you can always call in this show at, let's see here, at 209-348-9810, or just add NinjaShoe777 on Skype. I do apologize. I totally forgot to give the number out. I forgot to even mention calls or anything like that, but it is kind of a weird time to be having a show, so I don't expect there to be a whole lot of calls, but I do apologize for that. I do like to remind you listeners out there that this is an interactive show, and you can call in and speak with the guests. My rule is just give me a good 15 to 20 minutes to warm them up, and then you can go ahead and call in. I only ask you don't be immature and prank or do anything that's going to disrupt the show, because this show is important to me. I believe in what I'm doing here, and I'm sure there are plenty of other shows out there that welcome prank calls and nonsense and things like that. So you would probably be much better off doing it to those shows. So please don't prank the show. It's just not good, because you know what happens. And I don't mean to say this like, I'm going to turn the lights off on the whole class or make you put your heads down because it's one dumbass, but it does make it harder to take calls from the good callers. It makes it hard because I don't want people calling in and pissing off my guests or being obnoxious. So when that happens, I do have to kind of close the phone lines, and I don't like to have to do that. And I'm not doing it because I'm trying to punish the class or anything like that. I mean, don't be ridiculous. I'm just doing it because I don't want anybody to piss off my guests. I don't want to have a bad reputation or anything like that. That's the only reason. But anyways, like 99.9% of you guys out there are super cool about it. It's just that 0.01% that wants the attention or whatever. I do have a letter I'd like to read to start things off. There is a lot going on in the world, but I got to be honest with you. I just did not have the time to really look at the news that deeply this morning. I was running late. I had to start the show. If any of you have any news stories that you'd like to share, you can call in. But I don't really have any news today. I suppose maybe it's a good day because there's not any news. I do have some letters, though. I'm going to read one right now. This first one, or actually it's the only one. Dear Daniel, what band has become the most washed out and shitty? What band has become the most washed out and shitty, ... besides Metallica? Signed, Dominic. So you take Metallica away from me, and all of a sudden this question becomes very hard to answer. I just don't like picking on bands out there. I don't like calling them washed out or saying they don't have the talent anymore or being insulting like that. I love music so much, and I have so much respect and appreciation for all the legendary bands out there, rock bands, metal bands, things like that, even pop and stuff like that. Like I'm, as many of you know, I'm a big Michael Jackson fan, and I'll always like Michael Jackson no matter what happens. But if I really have to ask myself, honestly, what is a washed out band that I can think of? There's two that come to mind. There's Green Day, which was kind of always an annoying punk band. I mean, there's a lot of fans of Green Day out there. I don't mean to pick on Green Day. I don't dislike Green Day, but they do kind of have one of those reputations of a band that used to have more aggressive style and tone things back, and they had that song that came out years ago is like, something unpredictable, in the end it's right. Something like that. And they played that song on the radio over and over and over and over and over and on and on and on. And they just played it to death. And I think a lot of us just got sick to death of hearing that song, and we started to actually hate Green Day. I think that's kind of how it went. It's something unpredictable, in the end it's right. I know all you girls out there are swooning when I sing. You're getting all hot and bothered. It's something unpredictable, in the end it's right. It's so romantic, isn't it, when I sing that way? I hope you have the time of your life. Actually, my rendition is better than the original, isn't it? But anyways, they played that song so much. They even used it for my graduation when I was in junior high school. It's like the most cliche, predictable thing. It's kind of like that song that Gary Jules' cover of that Tears for Fears song on Donnie Darko. Every happy birthday, happy birthday. You know that song? They played that to death, and that was a really awesome song. And I don't hate that Green Day song, it's just they played it to death. It's like the Pearl Jam song, Jeremy. They play that over and over again, over and over and over and over and over. Stuck his face in the recess teacher's breast. Oh, I know I forget. And I hit him with a surprise right. Oh, I can't listen to that song. And I promise I'm going to stop singing right now before I lose even more listeners. What else do we have here? Okay, so after yesterday, I admit when I got off the phone with Stan Deo, I was a little bit frazzled, I guess would be a good word to describe it. A lot of the stuff that we were talking about, I kind of put away, I suppose you could say. I didn't want to think about it or really look at it. I wanted to just focus on positive things and frivolous things like pro wrestling and playing the guitar and, personal things, selfish sort of interest. But I have to admit, after yesterday, I feel like I'm right back in it. I feel like somehow my mind went back in the box a little bit, and I became very much in denial about what's going on. But the truth is, there is something going on, and some of you have asked me, do I really believe that Revelations is playing out right now? I have a really hard time answering that question, because I can see the way things are going. I could see like what's going on in Israel, and I could see how society has changed, and how there's so much spying going on, and how the government is actually getting into people's houses with the technology and spying on them. To me, that's the mark of the beast. I don't know if putting things into the Christian paradigm is really right. I don't think that's the only perspective on this. I think that the Native American prophecies, the prophecies from the country of India, the prophecies from any other culture are just as valid. They're just as valid, they're just as important, but they all seem to allude to some kind of end-time scenario or a period of great change, just something big happening in the future. And I don't want to be one of these soothsayer types that's going around getting everybody worried about things like Y2K or the Russians attacking or 2012 or anything like that. It never really seems to happen, right? But there's a danger there. Because every time one of those dates comes and goes, everybody becomes a little bit more complacent. They stop believing that anything could happen more and more. Every time they set up one of these false dates, whoever's responsible, they don't actually play out and come to fruition. Well, that's all the more people that aren't going to believe the next one that comes around. So I understand how many people out there, they don't want to talk about this stuff. They don't want to look into it. They don't want to touch it at all because they think it's all bullshit. It's fear porn. It's negative. It's dark. I hear the word fear-based thrown around a lot, and I really hate that word. I mean, I don't mean to say this to offend anybody out there, but I find that to be whenever I hear somebody say fear-based, like I've had people say that about my show. Like they'll say, oh, that guest that you had on, that was fear-based stuff, and there's no bad aliens, there's no demonic beings, there's nothing like that out there. It's all self, or it's all an illusion, or it's something like that. And I just don't like that way of looking at things, because for one, calling things fear-based and dismissing them outright before you even look into them is wrong. You don't know if it's real or not. That's the first thing, is having a label ready to throw at anything that disrupts your worldview. That's going to block you off from a lot of information. It's also going to put you in danger because you're so busy sticking your head in the sand, you might encounter something that is entirely evil. We know that evil does exist out there. You might encounter something like that and then lie to yourself and say that it's either good or it's an illusion, or maybe you will just completely disregard it and not even want to talk about it. So I think calling things fear-based or calling people fearmonger and stuff like that, I don't think it's right. But at the same time, I do believe that there are genuine fearmongers out there. Like, I suppose Alex Jones would be one of them. I remember long before the real hardcore conspiracy stuff started, he would talk about Russia is going to do this and that and get everybody all worried that Russia was going to attack, or get everybody worried about Y2K. He's always seemed to really benefit from fear and tragedy. And that's not what this program is about. It's not about scaring people or getting them to believe in bullshit, scary things or anything like that. It's about educating. It's about raising awareness. It's about spreading wisdom and knowledge, because information, knowledge, and wisdom, these things protect us. They don't put us in danger like you might think. Knowledge protects, and ignorance endangers. By not talking about something, sometimes you can empower it all the more because you do have that fear. And I hate to break it to you, but a lot of these entities out there, or whatever they are, they seem to be able to actually feed on your fear and use it to their advantage. So I would be really careful using words like fear-based, because that means that you are afraid. Yeah, that's what that means. You're saying this is fear-based. I'm afraid. Just because something's scary on paper doesn't mean that I'm afraid of it. If I'm talking about something like underground alien bases, it might be scary to me at the moment, or it might not be, because I don't believe in being afraid of these things, even though I sometimes am. I think that's a mistake. I think by being afraid, you're doing nothing but empower them. And there's a lot of people out there that they go completely insane if you say the word alien or reptilian or demon to them. They can't handle even hearing those words. It puts them in a state of madness. You'd be better off offering them some LSD or something than bringing up some of these topics, because they seriously put a scare into some people. And I don't know if it's religious upbringing. I don't know what it is, but many people out there, they feel that any sort of topic that rubs them the wrong way needs to be rebuked. I don't really have that mentality. I go in and I explore these things, and I try to be as fearless as possible as I can about it. Even sometimes when I'm not successful in holding back the fear, that's still what I believe. Fear is the mind killer, like they say in the Dune series. I believe in going in, I believe in hearing what people have to say, whether they are a Christian, a Satanist, a hacker, a guy that believes in reptilians, whatever it is. I want to hear them out. If I know in my heart absolutely for sure that it's bullshit, I will not have them on. But I just don't like... I don't like the fear-based sort of talk. I don't believe that. Maybe you do. I'm not telling you what to believe. To each his own. I would never say that you should believe what I believe, because I don't put myself on that type of pedestal. I just believe that it's good to keep an open mind. It's good to use discernment, and it's not good to approach these topics unless you're willing to take the bad as well as the good. Let's put it that way, and be done with it. Okay, so that's that. Another thing that I've been getting asked quite a bit about is if there are any groups, because I recently said that I don't have anything against any groups out there, any sort of classifications or minorities or anything like that. This person asked me yesterday, they asked, are there any groups that you absolutely abhor and detest? Yeah, of course. I mean, a group like NAMBLA or some of these KKK, neo-Nazi people like that. Yeah, of course. That's an ideal. That's a philosophy. That's not like a race. It's not something that you're born into and you can't help. I suppose the pedos might tell you something like that, but I don't even understand those arguments, because if they say they've got something that they can't help, it still doesn't mean that it's okay, especially to carry it out. I think that anybody that would involve themselves in anything even close to that probably needs some deep psychological counseling, and probably needs to stay the hell away from schoolyards or their relatives' kids or anything like that. So yeah, there are some groups that I very much dislike. I dislike anybody that is opposed to truth, that's for sure. I suppose the Illuminati would be a group that I'm not okay with, if they exist. That's not a group I'm okay with. I don't have anything against the Freemasons. I understand they might be involved in certain things. I understand that they might be Luciferian at the highest levels and tied to this and that, but that doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you're a Freemason. It doesn't even mean that you know anything. Even if you're one of the higher up people, it doesn't mean that you are involved in any sort of conspiracy. Would I want to spend my time learning secret handshakes and codes and symbols and phrases and things like that? Not really. I'd rather be behind a mic. But if somebody's a Freemason, what I have found is, in general, they tend to be better than average people. Maybe because they do have some sort of belief in a higher power. Maybe because they believe in brotherhood and doing the right thing. Maybe because they are typically interested in things like magic and history and things like that. Maybe that's why. But in general, I've found that most Freemasons I've met have been really outstanding individuals. I've even considered joining myself, but I don't want to take any oaths. I refuse to take an oath. I refuse to pledge allegiance to any group, organization, and especially any individual. I absolutely refuse to do that. I'm a free and sovereign person. I don't need to do anything like that. Why would I sell myself out? Why would I join anything? I don't need that. I don't need that sense of belonging. I don't need to have this group of friends. I don't need anything like that. Some people, they really need others. And of course I need others. I mean, I need to have some human interaction, but I don't need to be part of any sort of social group or anything like that. Maybe when I was younger, maybe when I was in my early 20s and even my mid 20s, I still wanted to, hang out with the cool kids and stuff like that. But now I'd rather not hang out with the cool kids because quite often the cool kids are obnoxious, stupid, vapid, and not people that I would want anything to do with. And actually, most of the cool kids are probably married and have kids by now. So anybody that's still trying to be a cool kid at my age is probably a super big loser, right? Anybody that's still partying at my age. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, there's a scale there, a variance. Like, you could be somebody that goes to social functions and has a drink at the bar from time to time without being a total party animal. I'm not looking to be a party animal at this point. I've got more constructive things to spend my time on. But anyways, that's enough of that. Another thing that I want to talk about is how many times I've seen UFOs in my life. I've seen quite a few UFOs. I don't expect you out there to believe me. I don't expect you to believe me with no evidence or proof or anything like that. Of course not. How could I expect that of you? But yeah, I've seen UFOs not just once, twice, 3 times, at least 5 times, maybe more. But I don't know if it's the area I live in. I don't know if I'm really an annoying person to some of these alien Illuminati bastards. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I've seen quite a few UFOs. It's to the point now, if I see one, I don't really get that super excited. I'm just like, oh, okay, there's another UFO. I don't know what it is or where it comes from. I just know it's pretty and it flashes and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, unless I can get them to land and walk onto the ship and actually get some new information about this stuff, then I don't have much to go on. I'm not that interested. I want them to come down here and tell me where they're from, what their planet's like, what their culture's like. I want to learn about their biology. I want to learn about their species. I don't want to watch their ships fly by every day, because at some point it gets boring. Even if they can do fancy turns and maneuvers, I want to see an actual physical alien in the flesh right in front of me. And I'm not going to settle for anything less than that. Because that's the point that I'm at. I'm past the point of, do aliens exist or not? Yes, they exist. I don't know where they're from. I don't know if the Earth is round or flat or what, but I know that there are other beings out there. I know that much. You think that there's just humans? Why would you think that? Do you really think humans are so important that they're like God's children, or they're gods, or they're the only apex intelligent life to exist? What's the reasoning behind that? I'm willing to bet there's a lot of species out there that are smarter than humans. I think in some ways, octopi and dolphins and even certain apes are smarter than humans in certain ways. And to think that we're all that there is, or we're the apex of evolution, or the apex of creation, I really believe that's nonsense. For one thing, there's all these stories about giants having had walked the earth, and they are said to be the hybrids of humans and alien beings, and there's bones and plenty of evidence of that. Apparently it gets confiscated, but there's a lot out there. There's enough to convince a person that they did walk this earth and they did exist. And there's some big people, like the Big Show. Oh, it's the Big Show. Oh, it's the Big Show. Like, how do we know that guy doesn't have some leftover Nephilim genes or something like that, right? Or the Great Khali. Or I'm sure there's plenty of really tall, big people out there that never seen a pro wrestling ring. All you got to do is Google them. But humans are not all that there is, not even on this planet. Dolphins have bigger brains than humans do. In proportion to their body mass, yeah, dolphins are smarter than people. They just don't have opposable thumbs. But they have a language. A dolphin is capable of making, like, I don't know the exact numbers, but they have two cavities in their noses, and both sides can push or pull. And using that ability to push and pull through either side and actually form the cavity just like a human would when they're talking, their vocal cords, they can actually flex and shape that cavity and create an entire world of sounds. They can create so many different types of sounds that we can't even comprehend what they can do. And they can also see things in the water using their echolocation. They can see if you have a stomachache. They can see right through your skin. They know what's going on with you. Humans can't do that. So don't tell me that humans are the apex, humans are the best. Humans are not the best at everything. Can humans breathe underwater? Can humans fly like birds can? Are humans that different than apes with our hairy balls and hairy asses and hairy armpits that stink? Why do you think humans are so magical and special? Do we eat bananas like gorillas do? Do some humans even eat their own poo? Mentally ill humans? Like gorillas do? Yes. Okay, I'm rambling on a little bit too much on this episode, aren't I? Yes. So let's close things out, and we've got another show tomorrow. So for those of you that are seriously addicted to this show, and I know many, many of you out there are, don't worry, there's plenty more to feed your addiction. We're going to keep it moving, but right now, it's time for the mind-blowing moment of the day. So today's mind-blowing moment of the day. Oh, somebody's calling. Okay. Hello.
Hey, Daniel.
Hey there, buddy.
How are you, my man?
Doing good. Just finished up another kick-ass day of broadcasting.
Damn, have you been on for 4 hours?
I started around, I think I started at 4 o'clock, so I'm getting pretty close.
Have you had 2 guests on tonight?
Yeah, actually I did. I had the Bill from the Mandate 33 YouTube channel, the guys that go out in the field and investigate various occult and mysterious paranormal sites. I had him on first, and then I had Gregg Housh on second on this show. So yeah, just keeping it rolling.
I caught Gregg Housh most of his interview, but I thought you were maybe same schedule as last night. I should have looked closer.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. It's just because my schedule, I have to fit shows in between when I work, so I have to really, really be careful how I schedule things so I don't completely burn myself out. Otherwise, I would just do a show on Saturday nights and just call it good.
No, totally makes perfect sense. Just killer shows, though. Yeah, I was at work listening to your I'm just barely getting home, but I was listening to you from about an hour or so into Gregg Housh's interview. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to want to go back and listen to that whole thing because we heard about the birth of Anonymous. I mean, that is so cool. That is. Yeah, you really got to check out that show, Mr. Robot. I know you're not like a computer guy or anything like that, but you would still love the show.
Yeah, I'll have to. I've heard a lot of good things about that one. Haven't looked at it, but I'll definitely pull it up and take a look. Your show last night was pretty cool. It was Stan Deyo. For a minute there, I thought he was going to baptize you right there on air.
Yeah. I, as you know, I'm not really what would be considered a Christian. Sometimes people that rubs them the wrong way, and I can't really say much one way or another in regards to that. But it's not to say that I don't believe in a God or revelations or anything like that. It's just that I try to incorporate other faiths and beliefs and religions into my overall sort of worldview and my overall belief, as opposed to walking around with a Bible and saying this or that is true and you should come to Christ and stuff like that. That's not really my type of thing. But it doesn't mean that I deny the things that I can see, like what's going on in the world with the spying and things like that. Last night it really kind of brought me back into that, where certain things that I learned about in my past that I tried to kind of put away were brought to the surface, and it's scary to me because it's not like entertainment, it's not anything like that. It's very, very real and undeniable for me. Sorry to rant on like that.
Oh, you're all good. And I kind of realized that too. And so don't get me wrong. I look at everybody's view as valid, at least to them, and I'll listen to every view. The number of Christian faiths that I've looked into and their different strains of belief, so many over the years, from the Catholics to the born-agains to the Protestants to the to the Mormons there's so many different views there, but that doesn't mean that there isn't power or energy in those views. The Mormons, they have, you remember last night where Stan Deyo was saying, I know some people that can come and lay their hands on you and get rid of those demons for you, Daniel. Do you remember when he was saying that?
Yeah.
The Mormons have a thing where they'll come and your closest family, relatives, uncles, dad, grandpa will all come and they'll lay their hands on you if you're sick or having a real bad problem. They put a little oil on their hands, special oil, and then they all just put their hands on you, and that stuff works.
Yeah, but like the thing with
just
me,
because they're Mormon or Christian or born-again Christian or whatever their view is, even if I might not agree with some of those views or interpretations, doesn't mean that I don't understand that they have real power in their laying on of hands and prayers and different things that they do.
Yeah, sure. Very well said, Todd. And I think that there's a distinction I need to make here, just to be clear. At no point, I do not think that I am possessed. I don't think that there's demons inside of me or anything like that. But I can't say that they're not around me. I'm sure that I am influenced and I experience oppression and I experience temptation and things like that. I'm sure that they can influence me and maybe even do little physical things here and there, but that doesn't mean that I actually have like demonic beings inside of me. I mean, that's ridiculous. If that were the case, I'd be ranting and raving and bouncing off the walls, and I can't even prove that they're around me or doing anything like that either. It could be reptilians. It could be my imagination,
I don't think he was. Yeah, I don't think he was saying that they were going to cast them out of you. I think he was saying they'll come and help. They'll come and help get them off you or push them away.
Yeah,
they're bugging you.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that, but I do kind of take my own measures. Like I'll use protection spells, and those are from the occult world, and somebody that's a hardcore Christian would probably not agree with that, but that's what works for me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'll put shields and circles and do all types of stuff that I've learned over the years. And they work, especially if you do them every day. You don't have to do them every day, but visualization, is the key to making things like that work. They've done tests where they had one basketball team. They put two teams of basketball players up against each other, and they had and it was just on free throws, which team could shoot the most free throws. They had one team visualize the night before, the whole night, that visualized making the free throw. And the team that visualized making the free throws all night long outscored the team that didn't, even though they're equally matched. And there's a number of other things you can point to that show visualization works. And the more you practice it, the better it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that a lot of people probably don't realize, even people that are into this sort of thing, is that the purpose of a temple is actually to isolate you. A lot of times temples are built on certain ley lines, magnetic points. When they build them, they use certain materials, and they'll actually do cleansing on them after they're finished. And the whole point of a temple is to completely magnetically, energetically, psychologically, spiritually block any outside influences from affecting you while you are inside the temple.
Yeah, it gives you a free space, a safe space that you can operate inside of without being affected by anything from outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And maybe that's something that we kind of need to get back to. Maybe instead of having churches on every street corner, maybe we need to have temples that people can walk into and just kind of be alone and be to themselves.
Pretty much every church has a spot where they'll let you do that, I think. You can just walk in off the street down at the big Catholic church here and sit and reflect quietly in front of, giant statues and stuff if you wanted to. But, the important part is it doesn't really matter if you're in the church down there or if you're at your home or you're at work. It's all in your mind. And so the trick is to realize that you can have that space or place right where you're at any time.
Yeah, I think that you're definitely correct about that. More and more, I've come to realize that there's all kinds of things you can do through visualization and actually there's a world inside of you. There's a universe inside all of us. There's a universe around us, but there's also a universe inside of us. As above, so be below, or however it goes.
Yeah. And there's a number of ways you can, things you can use to try to explain how it works. But, there's so much evidence, if you want to look at it, that the mind can't tell the difference between your inner mind can't tell the difference between a real or an imagined event. And so we pretty much act off of, exterior stimuli and our own interior stimuli that's been based upon what we've been taught on how to act. And so if you take the time and sit down and reflect inside yourself and find that quiet space in that temple of your own mind, you can start to see why things develop, why you're doing certain things. But you got to have that quiet place to sort of sit down and reflect on the deepest parts of yourself.
Yeah, for all we know, there is no physical, truly. It's all just ideas and concepts, and it's either us or something else that's just dreaming this all up, and we just play it all out, just like we would play out a dream that we're having, where everything feels completely real and it's relevant, and sometimes you'll be in a dream and you'll remember being a completely different person and having a completely different past and being a character. It's like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, like even play out a whole lifetime or
Yeah.
long periods of time in a short one night or in a short span of time, which tells you there's so much more inside us going on than we realize consciously. Yeah, just wanted to tell you you're doing great shows, dude. Just love the shows.
Yeah, awesome.
Killer guest.
While I've got you on the line still, what do you think about what's going on in Charlottesville?
I think it's what we've talked about. They got all the news stations are already there before the event even occurs. They got the extreme neo-Nazis over here, and then the George Soros characters over here, the left wing over there, and there's set up for a big event to go down. The news is all there. There's a giant clash between two groups that don't really represent the United States. They're a very minuscule portion of our population and their views, but somehow the news is all focused there and given both, those sides the attention. So anybody, Republican or Trump voters are now going to be connected with neo-Nazis, more evidence that we need more of a police state. Yeah, it's just pushing us further down that bad road.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that George Soros people thing, because I can't imagine why anybody in their right mind would possibly want to actually go to the home of some of these groups and go antagonize them and fight with them there. You'd have to be out of your mind to even go anywhere near any of that stuff.
Totally. I talked to my mom about this today because I talked to my mom about all the same things you and I talk about. And I told her the same thing. I can't believe these people that would go to those events, they're setting themselves up for, God, who knows what on both sides. And they probably got a ton of well-meaning people that are just misguided, a lot of them. And then a handful of them, Daniel, that are the agents, the agent provocateurs, hiding in the middle of it all.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that it falls right back into this, whatever it is, revelation sort of agenda, this control. Some people would prefer not to tie religion to it or anything like that, but it seems to all be the same thing. It seems that these leaders, they have complete control through using these divide and conquer, order out of chaos tactics, and this is really just another big, awful distraction that is keeping everybody's eyes off the real issues, and not only doing that, but just keeping people in conflict and keeping them hateful towards each other.
And confused and in a fog, and that's who gets the attention. Most people haven't heard of a lot of these topics that we discuss or these ideas, and they get most of their information from the mainstream news on the world and how it works and what's going on in it. And so if you've got the power of all the news stations and what they cover, a good portion of our society's consciousness is being shaped by the television, and that's being ran by the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you take certain groups out there and you turn them into victims, you do nothing but depower those particular groups and those individuals, because you're labeling them and saying that they're this and they're that. And in reality, everybody's just an individual. I mean, we're all the same. And, black, white, Nazi, Asian, Jew, gay, straight, transgendered, alien. There's so many different ways a person can be, but sitting there and being judgmental or hating anybody, it's just lowest common denominator type stuff.
Totally. And I'm libertarian, as you know. I lean libertarian. That doesn't mean I agree with all the Libertarian Party members or figures that they run for the the candidates that they put up. But the philosophies of libertarianism, and they're basically they follow the Constitution, which everybody's equal under the law, whatever the law is. And we all have rights, and the way the Constitution was set up was the best form of government ever seen on this planet. So, and we're far from that now.
Todd, I'm sure that you've had. I mean, I've had plenty of this type of people that I've known throughout my past, but I've known some really awful racist people. Have you come across quite a few people like that in Utah?
Yeah, I've met racist people. My grandpa was probably, said racist things that you would never say today. My parents, though, weren't racist whatsoever, and my family's always been real accepting, and I keep my circle of friends too, of like mind. Racism's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's horrible. It's about as stupid as you can get. Number one, because we're all one race, the human race. So to think that your race is better than another race, we're all one race.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if there are reptilians among us, they still got some human DNA.
Yeah, I mean, we're all going to have to unite to fight the reptilians at some point anyway, so we need to stop fighting amongst our own races and worry about the wing-tailed clawed Dracos that are going to eat us soon.
And Cthulhu that's coming from the deep.
Exactly. The stars will align at any point, and we're going to get a visit from Cthulhu.
That'll wake you up.
Am I saying that right, Cthulhu, or do you just say Thulu?
It can be pronounced a number of ways. Cthulhu, or but most people pronounce it Cthulhu.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up.
But Lovecraft himself said you should pronounce it like Cthulhu, real hard on the.
Yeah, that's right.
Cthulhu.
Yeah, that's right. That's how it's all spelled out. Yeah. I know you're not into computers or video games, but they're actually working on a new video game that is based on H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu, and oh man, I'm really looking forward to that thing. Maybe you should get yourself a video game system just so you can play it.
Yeah, I have a video game system. I got a Nintendo Wii, I think.
Oh, nice! I had no idea.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
My wife's a computer expert, so that's why I kind of one of the reasons why I'm not on it, because I know she is, and she's up there. She's current.
All right. Well, Todd, I do thank you for calling in and chatting with me about all of these various interesting things, and I will talk to you soon, but I am starting to get so tired that I think I'm going to lose my voice and pass out. So I'm going to close things out.
I'm in the same boat.
Oh yeah, I bet.
I just had to tell you, fantastic show, my man. Right on.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you listening to all these shows. I know it can be almost a lot of work in itself. So thanks for being such a loyal fan and listener of this program.
Oh, not really, because your show's best thing going, especially the live one. So, love it.
Well, I do
interact with you, the man.
I do appreciate that, Todd, and I will talk to you again soon. We got another show coming up tomorrow. Until then, you have a great day.
Oh. All right. Peace, Daniel.
Peace. And there you have it. That was Todd. I was about to close out the show before he called, but there's just a couple more things I want to touch on real quick. So earlier on the previous show, when I was talking to the Mandate guy, Bill, I asked him if he would ever go to an underground base, and I should probably answer that question myself. I don't think it's a good idea to do anything like that, and I would hate for my words to be misconstrued and for anybody to actually do something like that, thinking that there's nothing to worry about, or it's all fake, or it might be fun to go check out something that's completely fake. If you do know the location of one of these things, to be quite honest with you, you probably should just stay the hell away from it. You probably shouldn't go anywhere near it, because as soon as they see you even getting close, I can only imagine you're going to have your phones tapped and you're going to have all kinds of weird things going on. So if you do find out on the internet or somewhere else about where one of these things are, or if you see some videos or something and you decide to go check it out, don't misconstrue my words. I do absolutely do not want anybody to do that. I fully believe in the damn things. I mean, it's not a question of do they or don't they exist. They're there, period. They're in certain locations, Dulce, New Mexico. They're under the water, national parks, places like that. They are there. They are very rural. And the best thing that you can do is just stay the hell away from them. Don't go anywhere near them. You don't want to do that. It's good enough to just know that they might exist. There might be something like that over there. But trust me, you don't want to go there. That's one of the things, in my opinion, that can legitimately get you killed, and maybe even people you care about hurt. So I just want to throw that out there, because I realized I might have been being just a little bit irresponsible back there, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. The only other thing is I really want to recommend some of these free streaming South Park streams on YouTube. If you're a fan of the show South Park, pretty much any spare chance that I've been able to grab lately, and there hasn't been a whole lot of them, I've been watching those streams of South Park and just cracking up, and it'll just keep streaming show after show. There's no commercials or anything like that. I mean, of course, you should go out and buy the DVDs and pay for it and everything, but if you are a fan of South Park, check out those streams on YouTube. Just enter 24/7 South Park stream or something like that. That's it. I'm pretty beat. I did a long show yesterday. I did a long show today, and I'm splitting this all up because I'm trying to make the show a little bit more concise, a little bit tighter, have a little bit, instead of just going on and on, make it a little bit more short and sweet. That's not to say I'm not going to continue to do the extra long interviews or anything like that. I'm just going to cut it back a little bit, because I know when somebody's looking at an interview that's like 3 hours long, they're probably thinking, oh, that's a real daunting task. So I'm going to try my best to keep them under a couple hours, and only go above and beyond a couple hours if it's really good stuff. Like if it's just mind-blowing stuff nonstop, of course I'll just keep going with it. But I do want to respect you guys and your time out there, and make sure that you don't have to, make sure you don't miss any episodes because I'm on air so damn much. But tomorrow we have another show that's going to be with Asbjorn Torvald. We're going to be talking about Nordic Viking magic, and that's tomorrow at 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And until then, I'm going to go ahead and schmoozy on out of here. This is the end of days, and I'm Daniel. You have a great night, everybody.
Winter's coming.
The king has returned from the broken ruins of Babylon. This is the end of days.